The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The shuttle smells like recycled air and burnt circuits. Anakin Skywalker sits in the rear compartment alone, knees apart, elbows on his thighs, staring at nothing. Obi-Wan is in the cockpit. Rex is with the men. No one has checked on him in 40 minutes, and he is grateful for it. Mortis is behind them. The father is dead. Anakin doesn't know how long he was unconscious after the mind wipe. He doesn't know exactly when the memory began coming back. What he knows is this: somewhere over the black between star systems, a single thread pulled loose inside him, and then everything followed, coiling back in, image by image, until his chest felt like a hull breach sealing itself from the inside with molten metal. He remembers all of it now. He wishes he didn't. The first image always comes back the same way. Not cinematic, not dramatic, just a door. A temple door, sliding shut. Blue light, the kind that exists only in the deep rooms where Padawans sleep. He is standing in the corridor, looking in. His lightsaber is in his hand. The blade is lit. He can hear, not screaming, because there isn't time for screaming, just the soft, confused sounds of children rousing from sleep. Then the door seals. He had jerked awake from that one. Alone in the shuttle compartment, both hands gripping the seat rail, the mechanical fingers leaving dents in the plastoid casing. That was 4 hours ago. He has not slept since. He makes himself go through all 5, the way you press on a bruise to understand how bad it is. Ahsoka. Her back to him. Her sabers on the floor. He catalogues the specific angle of her shoulders. Not angry, which he could work with, but done. A Togrutta's lekku droops slightly when they're in grief. He had learned that in their first month together. In the vision, hers hang flat against her back. She doesn't look back. Not once. The corridor is long, and she walks the whole length of it. He breathes through his nose. Pad next. Black volcanic rock, Mustafar, though he doesn't have that name yet. Just the image. A planet that is a wound. All fire and ruin. She is on her knees. Her hands are pressed to her stomach the way a person holds something they're afraid to lose. She reaches toward a shape in black that Anakin recognizes the way you recognize yourself in a mirror after an illness. The proportions right, but the face wrong. The eyes wrong. Everything behind the eyes wrong. Her mouth forms his name. The word doesn't reach him. Whatever is standing in that armor where he used to be, doesn't let it. He focuses on his breathing. In, 4 counts. Out, 4 counts. The mask. A red-lit chamber and a table and his own face, destroyed. The face of a man who burned alive and did not have the mercy to die. He had looked at it for a long time in the vision, unable to look away. The durasteel casing descending. The first mechanical breath, loud as a verdict in an empty room. He skips ahead to the last one. A world, blue-green and alive and completely, utterly ordinary, the kind of planet you pass in a transport and don't register, because it is simply there, the way everything simply is, until it isn't. And then, it isn't. No explosion, no fire, just absence. The space where a world was, and silence where billions of voices were, and the knowledge, absolute and sourceless, that the thing in the mask made that choice and felt nothing doing it. He doesn't skip that one. He makes himself look at all of it. He needs to remember what the alternative costs. The mechanical hand opens and closes on his knee. He watches it the way you watch something that belongs to someone else. Cold light through the porthole traces the seams where flesh ends and durasteel begins. Mid-forearm. He had cried when they fitted it, though he hadn't admitted that to anyone. Not grief for the hand, for what losing it meant, what violence had made of him. He has seen what comes next. All of it. The war's shape, the Senate's fall, the Council's end, the face of the man who will orchestrate all of it from a Chancellor's suite with a smile like concern. He knows. So what does he do with that? The question has been running since the first memory sealed itself back into place. Not can this be changed. He dismissed that doubt before Ahsoka's corridor finished playing. But how? How does a man who has seen the future move through the present without the present seeing back? He can't tell anyone. The conclusion is simple and terrible. He had run through every alternative in the first hour. Tell Obi-Wan, tell the Council, tell Padmé, report to the Chancellor, and each option dissolved immediately when he examined it. Obi-Wan would believe him. That is the problem. Obi-Wan believing him means Obi-Wan moving, the Council moving, the Order mobilizing, and Palpatine, who is Darth Sidious, who has spent 2 decades threading his will through every institution in the Republic, would see it coming. A Sith Lord who controls both sides of a war does not lose a war he watched develop. He would accelerate everything. The chips would trigger. The purge would come faster and harder, and there would be no warning. No. Whatever he does alone. And he does it quietly, silently, without rage. He is aware, sitting in this shuttle over this black, that this is the hardest thing anyone has ever asked him. He is also aware that no one asked him. He looks at his hands. Both of them. The one that is flesh and the one that isn't. He thinks about what the Father said. Before the end. The words had been obscured by the wipe, half burned away. But a few had survived. You are the chosen one. But prophecy is not a cage. Not a cage. He turns that over, sets it next to the mask, sets it next to the world with no name that stopped existing because of him. A cage is exactly what the future looked like. In the vision. A corridor with one door and the door already closed. But corridors have walls, and walls can be moved, if you know where they are. If you see them coming. If you are not running through the dark. He has been running through the dark his whole life. Trusting instinct, trusting love, trusting the Force the way you trust a current, letting it carry him wherever it chose. That is finished now. He makes a decision. It arrives without drama, without the feeling of revelation he might have expected. It settles into him the way a ship settles into dock. A quiet, mechanical certainty. A click of alignment. He will not become Darth Vader. Not the way Ahsoka's sabers on the floor stop a Jedi from walking. Not the way a promise stops a person from lying. He means it structurally, mechanically, as a fact about the future that he is going to make true with his hands and his mind, and whatever it costs him. He will become something the vision didn't show. Something the Father couldn't model. Something Palpatine has no playbook for, because every manipulation the man has ever run operates on one assumption, that Anakin Skywalker doesn't know what's coming. He knows. The mechanical hand closes into a fist on his knee. Holds there. Then, deliberately, opens flat. He breathes. The cockpit door opens. Obi-Wan's voice. Warm and carefully casual. The voice he uses when he's worried but has decided not to say so directly. We're entering Coruscant space. Probably ought to make yourself presentable. Rex tells me, you've been sitting in the dark for 4 hours. Anakin looks up. Whatever Obi-Wan sees in his face makes the older man go still for a moment in the doorway. I'm fine, Anakin says. The lie comes out perfectly. Flat, calm, textureless, Obi-Wan studies him with that particular Jedi patience that has always made Anakin feel slightly transparent. Then he nods, once, and doesn't push. Good, Obi-Wan says. We'll debrief on the ground. He disappears back into the cockpit. Anakin turns back to the porthole. Coruscant fills the glass now. A planet covered in light. 10 trillion lives burning bright against the black. All of them unknowing. He doesn't look away. He makes himself look at all of it. This is what he's keeping. Coruscant at night is a hallucination of light. From the landing platform on level 5000, the city planet spreads in every direction. Towers spiking upward into a burnt orange sky, speeder lanes threading between them like luminous veins. The whole apparatus humming with the specific frequency of a civilization that has never once considered it might be temporary. Anakin stands at the edge of the platform while the shuttle's ramp seals behind him, and he lets the scale of it land on him, because he needs to feel it. 10 trillion lives. The number is meaningless until you stand in the wind and smell the exhaust and hear the layered noise of it. Traffic and transmission static, and somewhere below, 40 levels down, something that might be music. He picks up his bag and follows Obi-Wan inside. The debrief is short. Shorter than it should be, given that they've just returned from a vergence in the Force so significant it bent the laws of what the living world is allowed to do. But the Council asks its questions and Anakin answers them, and his answers are accurate in every particular that doesn't matter. He sits straight. He keeps his voice level. He describes the father, the son, the daughter in the specific and carefully incomplete way of a man reporting what he saw, rather than what it meant. Windu watches him throughout with that particular quality of attention that functions less like listening and more like pressure applied to a joint, waiting for the wince. Anakin doesn't wince. Yoda speaks last as always. "Disturbance in you there is," the old master says. His ears angle forward slightly. "Settled you do not seem." "It was a difficult mission," Anakin says. "I watched the father die. That doesn't sit lightly." A pause. Yoda's eyes don't leave him. "No," Yoda says, after a moment. "It does not." The meeting ends. Mace closes his fingers around nothing and releases it. Anakin bows and walks out, and keeps walking, and does not look back to see whether any of them exchange a glance. They do. He doesn't need to see it. Padm's apartment is on the 400th level. He knows the access codes, the guard rotations, the particular sound the elevator makes when it arrives at her floor. A soft, pneumatic exhale, like relief. He has made this approach 100 times in 2 years of marriage conducted entirely in shadow, and every time the elevator exhales he has felt the specific loosening in his chest that meant safe. Here, her tonight the elevator exhales, and he stands in it for 3 seconds longer than necessary. He knows what he has to do. It doesn't make it easier to begin. She is awake. She is always awake when he comes back from something dangerous, sitting at the window with a datapad she isn't reading, dressed in something simple, her hair down, the political armor she wears in the Senate stripped away until she is just the person underneath. He has always loved her most in this version, the one she only shows in empty rooms. She stands when she sees him. Ani, the name lands the way it always does, direct, particular his. She crosses the room and she is reaching for him before she even arrives, and he lets her. He puts his arms around her and he holds her, and he presses his face into her hair and breathes, and for exactly 4 seconds he allows himself to feel the full weight of what he is about to do to her. Then he steps back. She sees it immediately. She was always going to. Padmé Amidala survived the Trade Federation blockade at 14 years old by reading people faster than they could construct a lie, and she has had 2 years to learn the specific language of his body. She reads the step back the way she reads a Senate vote. Not just the result, but the architecture of what produced it. "What happened?" she asks. Her voice is careful, not frightened yet, gathering information. "Nothing I can talk about yet," he says. Mission protocol. It is not a lie. It is a true sentence deployed with deliberate intent to mislead, and the distinction matters to him even though it probably shouldn't. Padmé looks at him for a moment. Her eyes move across his face the way hands move across a surface searching for a crack. "You're not hurt," she says. Not a question, an observation, the first data point sorted. "No, but something happened." "Yes, and you can't tell me. Not tonight." She absorbs this. Her jaw doesn't tighten, which is how he knows she is actively managing her reaction rather than having one. The managed version is, in some ways, harder to watch than the open version. "Okay," she says finally. "Then come to bed." He gives himself 2 days. 2 days to feel the full shape of what the vision cost him before he begins building the structure that will replace it. He uses them precisely, reporting to the temple in the mornings, training alone in the afternoons, returning to Padmé's apartment in the evenings, and sitting in the same room as her, without being in the same room as her. She doesn't push, she watches. She is patient the way a person is patient when they've decided that patience is itself a form of investigation. On the 3rd morning, Ahsoka finds him in the training salle. She is early. She is always early, because she learned punctuality from him and then exceeded him at it. the way she exceeds him at most things she decides to care about, which has always made him unreasonably proud. She stops in the doorway when she sees him already there, already moving, running a solo kata that he hasn't used since his own Padawan years. "You're up early," she says. "So are you." She drops her bag and reaches for a training saber. "Rex said you were quiet on the shuttle back." "Rex talks too much." Rex was worried. She ignites the training blade and turns to face him across the mat. So was I. He looks at her. 16 years old, and she fights like a war already happened inside her, and she came out the other side, harder and brighter and better than the materials available should allow. She looks at him the way she always looks at him, like he is the person most likely to have the answer. Which is the look that makes the vision unbearable. Her sabers on the floor, her leku flat, her back turned, and not turning back. He makes himself stay in this room, this morning, this version of her. "I'm fine, Snips," he says. She studies him with nearly 2 years of knowing him written across her face. "You're doing the thing where you say you're fine, and your jaw does something that means you're not." My jaw isn't doing anything. It's doing something right now. He moves first, pressing forward into a sequence that gives her no time to follow the previous sentence. Because the move is faster than the conversation, and she has to respond to it, or eat a training blade to the shoulder. She responds. Of course she responds. She is extraordinary, and he has nearly 2 years of knowing that she becomes more extraordinary every month, and the war is going to try to destroy her, and Palpatine is going to try to use her destruction to destroy him. He hits harder than the drill requires. She pushes back, surprised, adapting. He hits harder still. Not cruelty, the opposite of cruelty. If the war comes, it will not hold back because she is young. If the war comes, it will not hold back because she is good. He knows the shape of what's coming, and she is going to have to be fast enough and hard enough and unbreakable enough to survive it without him. Because in every version of the future he has seen clearly, the help he can offer her has an expiration date. She catches a sequence he throws at triple the expected speed, redirects it, steps inside his guard and lands a hit to his ribs that would have scored in any formal bout. She grins, the grin that means "I got you." He doesn't let himself smile back. He resets his stance and comes again, and her grin fades into focus, and she stops looking for the friend and starts looking for the opening. Good. That is exactly what she needs to learn to do. It costs him more than any blow she lands. The Chancellor's suite smells like old wood and ambition. It is an unusual smell for a building made entirely of transparent steel and durasteel and poured ferrocrete, but Palpatine has spent 30 years installing it deliberately, the way he installs everything, slowly, without appearing to try. Real wood paneling from Naboo, a desk that weighs 400 kilograms and was carried up 40 flights because the turbolifts weren't wide enough. Shelves of physical books, actual paper, because paper suggests a man who values things that last. The whole room is a performance of permanence, and it has worked on every person who has ever stood in it. Anakin stands in it now, and catalogs all of it, the way you catalog a weapon. The summons came that morning. Handwritten. Or printed to look handwritten, which is its own kind of statement. "My dear boy, I heard you've returned. Come when you can. I have missed our conversations." The script looping and warm, the ink a particular shade of blue that Palpatine uses exclusively for personal correspondence, never official. Anakin had read it twice and set it on the counter and stood looking at it for a long moment before folding it and putting it in his pocket. He is here. Because not coming would be a signal. He cannot afford signals. Palpatine rises from behind the desk when Anakin enters, a practiced move, built into the man's greeting ritual like a reflex, designed to communicate, "You matter enough that I stand." He is smiling. The smile reaches his eyes, which is the unsettling part. Because the eyes are pale and deep-set, and they do something that eyes do when they are genuinely pleased to see you. And Anakin has been watching that smile for 6 years without knowing what it was smiling about. He knows now. Anakin. Palpatine crosses the room and takes his hands, both of them, the flesh and the metal, in that particular double grip that communicates warmth and also, subtly, possession. "You look tired." "Long mission," Anakin says. "Sit, Sit. Tell me about it. Or don't. I know the Council prefers its field reports stay within the Order. He says the Council the way a person says the name of an institution they've decided to find quietly disappointing. Not contempt. Something gentler and more corrosive than contempt. Fond exasperation is the register. The implication that he and Anakin share a private, rueful understanding of the Jedi's limitations. Anakin sits. He folds his hands in his lap. It was a Force-sensitive world, he says. Unusual readings. Nothing that affects ongoing operations. Palpatine settles into the chair across from him, not behind the desk. Never behind the desk in these personal meetings, because the desk creates hierarchy, and Palpatine has always been careful to position these conversations as something between equals. He leans forward slightly, elbows on his knees, the posture of a man who is genuinely listening. "Are you all right?" he asks. Truly. Not the report. 6 years ago, that question dismantled Anakin every time. The specificity of it. The implication that someone was asking about the person underneath the Jedi, the wound underneath the armor. Palpatine had understood, from their very first meeting, that Anakin Skywalker's most dangerous vulnerability was not rage or fear or ambition, but the simple, devastating need to be seen. "I'm well," Anakin says. "A little tired. Glad to be back." A beat. Palpatine's eyes move across his face with the same quality Windu's had in the Council chamber, but where Windu's attention is pressure. Palpatine's is something more like sonar. It sends something out and measures what comes back. What comes back, Anakin knows, is wrong. Flat, gray, the emotional signal of a man who has sealed his most readable frequencies behind something Palpatine doesn't have a category for yet. The Chancellor's smile doesn't change, but something behind it does, by one small degree. "I worry about you," Palpatine says. "The war asks too much of you. Of all the Jedi, but especially of you, you carry more than your rank requires, and the Council is not always as grateful as it should be." This is the first move. Anakin recognizes it the way you recognize a kata you've drilled 1,000 times, the opening sequence of the manipulation Palpatine has been running on him for years. Establish grievance. Confirm that the grievance is real, and the Council is its source. Position himself as the only figure who truly sees and values Anakin's sacrifice. "The Council has been fair," Anakin says. A small pause. Palpatine absorbs this. "Of course," he says warmly. "Of course they have. Forgive me, I only meant that your contributions often go unacknowledged in ways that I, personally, find frustrating on your behalf. You've earned your place on that Council 3 times over. I'm a knight. The rank is appropriate." Another pause. Slightly longer. Palpatine leans back a degree. The sonar goes out again. Anakin keeps his Force presence flat and gray and gives it nothing to bounce off of. Under Mace Windu's tutelage, or rather from watching Windu. Because Windu has never tutored him in anything, he has seen what deliberate Force stillness looks like in a master. He is not a master. But he has been practicing for 3 weeks since Mortis, in the temple's meditation rooms at hours when they're empty, and he is better at it than he has any right to be. Because he has better motivation than anyone in the history of the Order to learn it fast. "You seem different," Palpatine says. The warmth is still in his voice, but underneath it something has shifted. The quality of attention sharpening. "Since you've returned. More settled, perhaps, or," he tilts his head, "more distant." "I've been meditating more." "Ah," a smile. The Jedi solution to everything. "It helps." Palpatine looks at him for a moment, then he stands, moves to the window, the great curved transparisteel that frames the Senate dome in the middle distance like a portrait of power, and clasps his hands behind his back. "I had a conversation recently," he says, in the tone that means he is changing approach rather than subject, with a senator from the Outer Rim. She raised concerns about the conduct of several Jedi generals in the expansion region campaigns, civilian casualties, Anakin, the sort of thing that, mishandled, becomes a political instrument for those who would prefer the Jedi's role in this war to be. He pauses, reduced. This is the second move. If emotional grievance doesn't open a door, Invoke institutional threat. Make Anakin feel the Jedi are in danger from external forces that only Palpatine can see clearly, and only Palpatine has the political capital to neutralize. Build dependency. Build the sense that without this man's intervention, everything Anakin protects is vulnerable. I trust the Council is aware, Anakin says. Palpatine turns from the window. The expression on his face is the one Anakin used to read as paternal concern, and now reads as something with teeth behind it. I'm sure they are, he says. I simply wanted you to know that I am watching, that I am, as always, doing what I can. That's reassuring. Anakin says. Thank you, Chancellor. He means neither sentence. He delivers both without a seam. They talk for another 20 minutes. Palpatine cycles through 2 more approaches, the war's toll on Anakin's personal life, asked about with the delicacy of a man who doesn't officially know about Padmé and has spent years pretending not to, and a brief glancing reference to Shmi, worked into an anecdote about Tatooine trade policy with the precision of a surgical instrument, and Anakin meets each one with the same 3 responses. Rotated, I'm well. The Council handles that. I appreciate your concern. When Anakin finally stands to leave, Palpatine walks him to the door. The double grip farewell again. The smile. Don't be a stranger, Palpatine says. My door is always open to you. You know that. I do, Anakin says. Thank you, sir. He walks to the turbo lift. He keeps his pace even, his shoulders relaxed. The doors close. Alone in the descending car, he lets out a breath that started in the Chancellor's suite and has been waiting in his chest for 45 minutes. His mechanical hand is closed in a fist at his side. He opens it. Stares at the fingers. Makes each one extend, deliberately, until the hand is flat. Behind him, 40 floors up, he can feel, faintly, through the Force, through the building's bones. Palpatine standing very still in the center of his warm, carefully permanent room. Thinking, the sonar going out and finding nothing, and going out, again. Kamino exists at the edge of the galaxy's memory. The planet sits in a system that doesn't appear on most Republic navigation charts, deliberately excised, though Anakin doesn't know by whom or why. Only that the ocean world exists, and what it contains, because he has been there in the other life, and the memory of it sits in him like swallowed glass. Endless gray water. Towers rising from the surface on stilts, like the architecture of something that learned to survive by refusing to sink. Rain that never stops. And inside those towers, in growth chambers stacked floor to ceiling, 1 million soldiers being built for a war that their creator engineered specifically to require them. He requisitions a transport under mission orders. The paperwork is legitimate. A routine inspection of clone troop readiness, filed through the GAR's administrative office with Obi-Wan's countersignature, obtained without Obi-Wan knowing what it's actually for. That particular deception sits badly in him. He files it next to the others and keeps moving. The transport breaks atmosphere over Kamino at mid-morning, local time. Below, the cloud cover parts briefly, and the ocean fills the viewport, gray-green and infinite, the waves moving in slow, massive rhythms that suggest a world-sized indifference to the small things living above it. Anakin watches it from the cockpit without expression. Lama Su greets him in the main corridor, all polite height and formal cadence, the Prime Minister's pale neck inclined at the angle of professional welcome. The Kaminoans have always unnerved him in ways he couldn't articulate until now. There is something in their affect that resembles serenity, but is actually the specific emotional flatness of beings who have spent so long treating life as a production problem that the distinction between a person and a product stopped troubling them somewhere around the 5th generation of clones. General Skywalker. An honor. We were not informed of an inspection. Last-minute orders, Anakin says pleasantly. The Council wants updated readiness assessments. I volunteered. Lama Su's black eyes blink once, slowly, of course. Shall I have Nala say I'd like to observe the training rotations first? Independently, it gives me a cleaner read on baseline performance when the men don't know they're being watched. A pause. The Kaminoan's expression doesn't change, but something in the quality of his stillness does. Of course, Lama Su says again, I will have an aide show you to the observation deck. I know the way, Anakin says. I've been here before. He doesn't go to the observation deck. He goes to the medical wing on sublevel 9, which he knows exists, because he has stood in its ruins in the other life, the room stripped down to its bones in the aftermath of what is coming, the tank smashed. The records deleted by Kaminoans covering their own complicity. In this life, the room is intact. Clean white surfaces, the antiseptic smell of engineered sterility, growth equipment humming in the walls. The chip fabrication lab is through the second door on the left. It takes him 4 minutes to get past the lock, using a force push applied to the internal release mechanism with the precision of a man threading a needle through a keyhole. The door opens. He steps inside. The room is small and methodical. Racks of equipment he can't fully identify line the walls, but the central unit is obvious, a sealed chamber about the size of a food processor, feeding a series of tubes that run upward through the ceiling toward the growth tanks on the floor above. A terminal beside it, a data port. He pulls a slicing unit from his kit, bought under a false procurement order 3 weeks ago from a Coruscant tech market, paid in untraceable credits, and connects it. The terminal asks for authorization. He gives it what he prepared. Not his own codes, a copied authorization string taken from a maintenance request he intercepted in the GAR's administrative system, belonging to a Kaminoan quality control officer whose access level was exactly high enough, and whose face Anakin has never seen and will never need to. The terminal accepts it. The chip schematics come up in 3 seconds, and he reads them for 10 minutes straight. Standing absolutely still, the slicing unit recording everything to a chip he will later destroy the slicing unit to protect. He already knew what the chips do. In broad terms, the kill switch, the biological override that turns 200,000 loyal soldiers into executioners between one breath and the next. What he didn't know, until now, is the architecture. The activation pathway. The specific command signal and the organic components the chip bonds to during growth. He reads it all. He understands maybe 60% of it on first pass. He is a pilot and a fighter, not a biochemist, but 60% is enough to confirm 3 things. The chips exist in every clone currently in production. They are invisible to standard medical scans. And they can be removed surgically, if a surgeon knows they're there and what to look for. He copies the full technical package to the chip, closes the files, wipes the access log back 14 minutes, and disconnects the slicing unit. Then he opens a secondary menu he spotted during the read-through, the production schedule, the queue of active orders, the authorization chain for new chip batches. He makes 2 changes. The first, a quality control flag on the current production batch, routed to trigger a 48-hour hold on chip installation for clones in growth stages 7 through 12. It will read, to whoever reviews it, as a routine contamination protocol, the kind of bureaucratic delay that moves through Kaminoan systems without human review, because quality control flags are generated by the automated systems constantly, and no one reads them unless something actually fails. It buys time. Not much, and not for all of them, but some. The second change is simpler and more dangerous. He routes a copy of the full schematics, the complete technical package, the activation frequencies, the surgical removal protocol, to a dead-drop data address he has established on a private server on Coruscant, accessible through a relay that cannot be traced back to him, or to any active Republic node. He will need to get that data to someone who can act on it. A medic. A surgeon with the clearance and the courage to begin removing chips from willing clones without triggering the GAR's medical oversight system. He doesn't have that person yet. He is building toward that person, the way you build toward a target from range, identifying the shot, controlling the variables, waiting for the moment when the path is clear. He closes the terminal, disconnects, crosses back to the door. He spends 3 hours on the observation deck after that, watching the training rotations below with the focused attention of a general actually doing his job. Rex's unit runs a corridor breach simulation in the main training hall. Clean, fast, the kind of institutional competence that is still somehow personal when you know the faces, when you've eaten with these men and watched them choose to be more than what they were designed to be. Rex, Fives, Jesse, Kix. He watches Kix in particular. The medic moves through the simulation's chaos with a specific kind of attention that is different from the others, always tracking the fallen, always calculating the cost. It is the attention of a person who cares in a structural, bone-deep way rather than an instinctive one. The kind of caring that survives contact with what war actually does to bodies. Hicks is the one. He already knew it from the other life's fragments, but watching him move confirms it. He doesn't approach him today. Today is reconnaissance. Today is building the map. Lama Su finds him as he's preparing to leave, appearing at the end of the corridor with 2 aides and the smooth social inevitability of a man who has calculated that a conversation now costs less than a question left unanswered. Did the training rotations meet your expectations, General? Exceeded them, Anakin says, and means it. Your work here is extraordinary. The Prime Minister inclines his long neck. We take great pride in the product. The product. Anakin keeps his face open and pleasant. You should, he says. The Republic is fortunate. He shakes Lama Su's hand or performs the Kaminoan equivalent, a formal 2-fingered press, and walks to his ship. The ramp seals. He lifts off into the gray. Below, the ocean moves in its massive, indifferent rhythms, and the rain keeps falling, and in Sublevel 9, a quality control flag sits in the system waiting to be noticed or not, buying 48 hours for however many soldiers it can reach. The data chip is in his inner pocket. Against his chest. He can feel it there, small and heavy, the way a secret feels when it's finally moving in the right direction. He sets course for Coruscant and doesn't look back. The ambush comes on a Tuesday. Not that the day matters. The war doesn't observe the standard week with any consistency, and Anakin has learned to stop marking time by anything except the distance between one crisis and the next. But it is a Tuesday, and the mission is supposed to be a routine escort, a Republic supply convoy through the Hydean Way's outer spur. Light resistance expected. 2 gunships and a partial company of the 501st. Rex briefs him on the tarmac while the ships warm up. Straightforward interdiction point, confirmed Separatist patrol presence but nothing heavier than droid fighters. Anakin listens, nods, boards the lead gunship. 40 minutes into transit, the hyperspace exit dumps them directly into a kill box. It is not a patrol, it is a fleet. 3 Munificent-class frigates and a recusant destroyer arranged in a firing solution that can only have been prepared in advance, with foreknowledge of the convoy's route and timing. By someone with access to Republic operational planning at a level that has exactly one explanation, and the explanation's name is Darth Sidious. Anakin knows this immediately. The formation is too precise, the ambush too clean. There is no Separatist tactical genius who planned this from raw intelligence. This was handed to them. The route, the timing, the specific gap in the patrol coverage, handed to Grievous or Ventress or whoever is commanding from the destroyer's bridge, handed with the intent not of destroying a supply convoy, but of creating a crucible and putting Anakin Skywalker in it. He understands all of this in approximately 4 seconds. Then the first volley hits. The gunship takes cannon fire on the port engine and goes sideways. Anakin is already moving before the second impact, pulling himself along the interior handholds toward the cockpit, shouting over the comm for Rex to brace, for the pilots to compensate, for the second gunship to break left. His lightsaber is in his hand and not yet lit because there is nothing to cut, just energy and physics, and a ship that is trying to decide whether it wants to continue being a ship. The pilot, a young clone named Styles, 19 months out of Camino, Anakin knows because he makes it his business to know, keeps his hands on the controls through 2 more impacts. The gunship doesn't fall. It wobbles and corrects and wobbles again, and then Styles finds a pocket of clear air between the frigate's firing arcs and threads it, and they are through. And not dead. Good flying, Anakin says. Thank you, sir, Styles says, and his voice only shakes a little. The next 20 minutes are what the GAR's after-action reports will later call sustained multi-vector engagement, the antiseptic language that military bureaucracy uses to describe the experience of being shot at from 4 directions simultaneously. Anakin fights them in the air and then on the ground, when the convoy is forced to set down on the system's only moon, A gray, crater-marked body with enough atmosphere to breathe, and not enough to slow down the droid fighters strafing the landing zone. He moves through it with a clarity that is new and strange and frightening, even to him. In the other life, this was where Anakin Skywalker would fight from the center of his fear, the specific fear of losing Rex, losing the men, failing the mission, being inadequate to whatever the moment required. The fear would drive him forward, and the anger would sharpen him, and together they would burn through the engagement like a flame through dry grass, effective and consuming, and entirely dependent on having something to fear. He doesn't fight that way anymore. He fights from the outside in, from observation to action, from stillness, the same stillness he's been building in the meditation rooms. Applied now at full speed under live fire. He sees the engagement's geometry the way he sees a pod race, not as chaos but as a system with a logic to it. And he moves through the logic, and where the logic has gaps he fills them, and the droids keep falling. Rex watches him from cover during a brief lull, and says nothing. But the quality of his silence is the silence of a man revising an assumption he didn't know he'd made. Ventress arrives in the third hour. She drops from a shuttle that has no business surviving the gunship cover Anakin has organized, which means she timed her entry for the exact window when the second gunship was repositioning. A 30-second gap in coverage that she should not have known about unless she was watching the engagement from above and waiting for her moment. She lands 20 meters from him, twin sabers igniting red, and her smile is the specific smile of a person who has been paid to deliver a message that isn't made of words. "Skywalker," she says, "you look tired." "Ventress." He ignites his blade. "Who sent you?" She moves instead of answering. She is fast, she has always been fast, one of the 3 or 4 opponents in the galaxy who can make him work at his actual ceiling, and she comes in with both blades in a crossing pattern designed to force him back and wide, opening his center. He doesn't go back, he goes forward, inside her reach, where the crossed blades are a liability rather than an advantage, and she has to separate them quickly or catch herself with her own stroke. She separates them quickly. She is very good. They trade sequences at a speed that turns the rocky ground between them into a geometry problem. He is aware, during it, of the detachment, the strange, almost observational quality of fighting without the rage underneath it. He notes where she is strong and where she compensates, the slight over-rotation in her left wrist that emerges after a sustained offensive sequence, and he files it and continues, and waits. "You're different," she says, between engagements. She sounds genuinely curious. "What happened to you?" "Nothing," he says. "Something," she says, and presses the attack. He disarms her 20 minutes in. Not by outfighting her, he is not certain he can outfight her purely on technique, today or any day, because she is exceptional and he is honest enough to know it, but by waiting for the left wrist to rotate, and then directing his blade inside the angle it creates. And the force of the redirect sends her right saber spinning across the crater floor. She disengages, creates distance, her remaining blade still up, her pale eyes calculating. "This isn't over," she says. "It is for today," he says. "Tell whoever sent you that the ambush failed." She studies him for a moment with an expression he can't fully read. Not defeat. Not anger. Something more like the recalibration that happens when a variable doesn't behave according to expectation. Then she is gone, up and into the smoke, the shuttle collecting her before the gunships can reposition to block the exit. Rex reaches him 2 minutes later, armor dusty and singed at the left pauldron, a deep cut across his forearm that he hasn't acknowledged, because Rex never acknowledges minor damage during an engagement. 17 wounded, Rex reports. None critical. Styles took a hit to the shoulder, he'll be off rotation for a week. A pause. Could have been worse. It was meant to be worse. Anakin says. Rex looks at him. "Sir?" Anakin considers how much to say. Rex is one of the people he has been cataloging, the ones who have demonstrated across months of working alongside them, the specific kind of judgment that survives moral complexity. He is not ready to tell Rex about the chips, about Palpatine, about any of it. The architecture isn't complete, but Rex has earned something. Someone fed them our route, Anakin says. At a level above field intelligence. This wasn't a patrol that got lucky. Rex absorbs this with the quality of stillness that marks a man who has had to absorb hard information quickly and file it without flinching. "What do we do?" Rex asks. "We finish the mission," Anakin says, "and then we start being more careful about what we report through standard channels." Rex nods once, doesn't ask for more. Turns back to the men that evening on the transport home. Anakin sits in the rear compartment alone and lets himself feel the day's wait for exactly 5 minutes, timed against nothing, counted internally. The men who were wounded. Styles' shoulder. The 30-second gap in coverage that Ventress had known about. Palpatine had known about. The ambush wasn't meant to destroy the convoy. It was meant to kill him, or failing that, to break open the emotional seal Palpatine has been probing since Mortis, to create enough fear and enough loss to crack the gray stillness and let the rage back in, where it can be read and steered. He sits with that knowledge. His mechanical hand rests flat on his knee. The 5 minutes end. He picks up his datapad and begins drafting a route security proposal for the 501st's next operation, using a new encryption key he generated himself, stored nowhere in the GAR's systems. He keeps working until Coruscant appears in the viewport. Ahsoka submits the transfer request on a Wednesday morning. She doesn't tell him first. He finds out the way he finds out most things he isn't supposed to know, through the Force, which has a specific quality of warning when something he cares about is in motion in a direction he didn't authorize. He is in the middle of a debrief with the 501st's logistics officer when it arrives. Not as information but as a physical sensation, a tightening across the chest, lateral, left of center, the way a line feels when something pulls it taut from the other end. He finishes the debrief. He dismisses the logistics officer. He sits for a moment in the empty briefing room and looks at the wall. Then, he goes to find her. She is in the room of 1,000 fountains, which is where she goes when she wants to think without being found, which tells him the transfer request was not impulsive. The room earns its name, water moving over carved stone in patterns that suggest intention without stating it, the air cool and mineral, light filtering green through the overhead canopy of living things the temple has been growing for 200 years. It is one of the few places in the temple that feels like something other than architecture. Ahsoka sits cross-legged at the edge of a shallow pool, eyes open, watching the water. She doesn't look up when he arrives. She knew he was coming. She has always been able to feel him in the Force, the way junior Jedi can feel a signature they've calibrated to, and his is not a subtle one even when he's working to contain it. "I was going to tell you," she says. "I know," he says, and sits beside her, not across from her, beside, at the same level, looking at the same water. She is quiet for a moment. The fountains move. Somewhere in the canopy above, something small and living shifts from one branch to another. "Master Plo has an opening," she says, "for a senior Padawan." "He's a good teacher. He's an excellent teacher," Anakin says. "One of the best in the Order." Ahsoka glances at him sideways. She was expecting resistance, or hurt, or the particular version of Anakin Skywalker, who deflects pain with movement and volume. The agreement throws her. "Then you understand," she says carefully. "Tell me why," he says. "In your words." She is quiet long enough that he knows she has been rehearsing this, and is deciding whether the rehearsed version is what she actually wants to say. He waits. The water moves. "You've been training me like I'm already in the war," she says finally. "The real war. Not the one we're fighting now, something worse. Something you think is coming." She pauses. "You don't talk to me anymore. You correct my form and you run drills and you push me past what I thought I could do, and I am grateful for that, I think. But I don't know why it changed. I don't know what I did." The last sentence is quiet and costs her something. He can hear it in the way her voice drops on "did." Not accusatory, which would be easier, but genuinely uncertain. The uncertainty of a person who has been searching for the error in themselves because the alternative explanation, that it isn't about them at all, hasn't fully arrived yet. The vision arrives instead. Her lekku flat, her back turned, the sabers on the floor. He looks at the water and stays in this room. You didn't do anything, he says. Then why? It's not about what you did. He picks up a small stone from the pool's edge, gray, water-smoothed, unremarkable, and turns it over in his mechanical hand. It's about what's coming. What I know is coming and can't tell you yet. She turns to look at him fully for the first time. Can't or won't. Both, he admits. Right now, both. Her jaw sets. That's not good enough. Sky Guy, the name lands. The one she only uses when she is being entirely herself. Underneath the Padawan formality. Underneath the performance of competence she wears in the field. He has not heard it in weeks. He has not given her the space to use it. Which was the point. Which is the thing he cannot explain to her without explaining everything. I know. He says. I know it's not. I think about quitting, she says. Not the transfer. Quitting. The order. She says it the way people say the thing they've been most afraid to say. Quickly, before the fear can close around it again. Not often. But sometimes. When the war gets heavy and the council looks at me like I'm a liability they've agreed to tolerate, I think, what would it look like to just not do this anymore? He doesn't rush to answer. Doesn't tell her she shouldn't feel that. Doesn't perform reassurance. What stops you? He asks. She thinks about it. You, mostly, before, a pause. Lately I'm not sure. The stone in his mechanical hand, he is gripping it tightly enough that the servos in his fingers register the pressure and compensate. He makes himself ease off. Don't transfer, he says. Give me a reason. I can't. Not the real one. Not yet. He sets the stone down at the pool's edge. But I need you here, Ahsoka. I need you specifically. And I need you strong, and everything I've been doing, the training, the drills, the pushing, it's not because I think you're failing. It's because I know what's coming and I need you to be more than ready for it. She stares at him. That's not an explanation. No. He agrees. It's a request. The fountains move. She looks back at the water and her reflection looks back at her, and he watches her work through something internal. He can feel the edges of it in the Force. Not the content, but the shape. Something hard being examined from multiple angles, looking for the place where it gives. How long? She asks. I don't know. Are you in trouble? He considers the question honestly. Not the kind you can help with yet. Yet, she repeats. Yet, she doesn't withdraw the transfer request immediately. She sits with it for the rest of the day, and he respects that, because the worst thing he could do is give her the impression that her feelings about the last several weeks are wrong, simply because his reasons were good ones. They are not wrong. She has been doing the exact correct thing, reading the situation accurately, assessing it, making a rational decision based on the available information. The available information is just catastrophically incomplete, and he is the reason for that, and neither of those things cancels the other out. He goes back to his quarters that evening and sits in the dark for a while. Padmé has stopped asking what happened on Mortis. She has started doing something more dangerous. She has started watching him with a senator's eyes rather than a wife's, building a case from behavioral evidence the way she builds a legislative argument, and she is very good at it. 2 nights ago she asked, in a completely casual tone that was not casual at all, whether he had been sleeping normally before Mortis, or whether the changes she was seeing were older than she'd initially assumed. He had answered carefully, and she had listened carefully, and the quality of her listening was the quality of a person who has decided that the shape of the evasion is itself information. She is going to arrive at something close to the truth on her own. He has maybe 3 weeks before she does, possibly less. Obi-Wan, meanwhile, has said nothing. He asks how Anakin is sleeping, how the 501st is holding up, whether the Camino inspection revealed anything concerning, the last question asked in the same light tone as the others, and requiring the same careful answer. Obi-Wan is the best Jedi he has ever known, and the thing Anakin is most afraid of, in the quiet of the evening, is not Palpatine or the war or the chips or the vision. It is what happens when Obi-Wan finally decides to stop asking casually. His datapad chimes. The transfer request has been withdrawn. No message attached, just the administrative notification. time-stamped 40 minutes after he left the Room of 1,000 Fountains. He sets the datapad down on his knee. The mechanical hand beside it, flat, open, something in his chest that has been wound tight for 6 hours, loosens by a single degree. And he allows it, and then pulls it back. Because loosening is a luxury, and the plan is not finished, and the war is not over, and Palpatine is somewhere in the city right now. Recalibrating, he picks the datapad back up. He keeps working. The medbay smells like bacta and burnt ozone. Anakin becomes aware of this before he becomes aware of anything else, the smell arriving first, the way it always does after a bad engagement, sharp and medicinal and faintly sweet in the way that things designed to repair damage carry the chemical signature of damage itself. Then, the ceiling. White, utilitarian. The specific flatness of Republic military architecture that has never once prioritized aesthetic comfort over structural economy. Then the pain, which is familiar and arrives in tiers, the shoulder first, then the ribs, then the deep bruising across his back that tells him he hit something hard and hit it at speed, and will be reminded of it every time he breathes for the next 2 weeks. He doesn't move immediately. He takes inventory first, the way the war taught him. A full account of the body before you ask it to do anything else. Left shoulder, dislocated and reset, taped, will hold. 3 ribs, cracked, not broken, bound, back, bruised, nothing structural. The mechanical arm, fully functional, which is almost funny given that the biological parts fared worse. He is alive. He catalogs this without relief, because relief requires surprise. The engagement that landed him here had lasted 6 minutes. Grievous had been there personally, which should have been the first signal that the intelligence behind this operation was several tiers above anything the separatist military generated independently. The cyborg general arrived with 4 Magna Guards and a tactical configuration that exploited the exact layout of the communications relay Anakin had been assigned to hold, which could only have been prepared by someone who had read the classified mission file. He had held the relay. Barely. The Magna Guards were manageable 1 at a time, and impossible 2 at a time, and there had been a point. Somewhere in the 4th minute, where 2 of them had him in a constriction pattern between their electrostaffs and the wall, and he had done something with the Force that he doesn't fully remember and would prefer not to examine too closely, and the Magna Guards were no longer standing. Grievous had been different. Grievous with 4 lightsabers and no hesitation, and the specific savagery of a machine that has decided the outcome in advance. Anakin had fought him off the relay's edge and into the lower corridor and back, and taken the shoulder in the second exchange, and the ribs in the third, and then Obi-Wan's voice had come over the comm, and the clones had breached the outer door, and Grievous had calculated the odds and fled. Obi-Wan had caught him when his knees went. He opens his eyes properly, and Obi-Wan is there. Sitting in the chair beside the medbay cot with the stillness of a man who has been there for some time, jacket off, sleeves pushed to the elbows, the specific quality of presence that Obi-Wan maintains in the difficult moments, not hovering, not demanding, simply there. Solid, continuous, welcome back, Obi-Wan says. How long? 4 hours. He pauses. Kix says the ribs will need a week. The shoulder, too. Anakin looks at the ceiling. Grievous knew the layout. Yes, he knew the file. The classified file. Yes, Obi-Wan's voice is even. I know. Anakin turns his head and looks at him. Obi-Wan looks back. The expression on his face is not the careful, managed concern of a man protecting someone from information. It is the expression of a man who has arrived at a conclusion and is waiting, with the patience of someone who has been waiting for months, for confirmation. Obi-Wan Anakin starts. Don't, Obi-Wan says, gently. Don't tell me you're fine. Padmé arrives 20 minutes later. He hears her before she enters. The specific pace of her walk when she is managing fear by converting it entirely into momentum, heels precise on the floor, no hesitation at the door. She comes in, and she looks at him and for exactly 2 seconds, everything she has been holding together since Mortis shows on her face. Unmanaged. Fear and relief, and something older underneath both of them. Something that has been building since the first night he stepped back from her reach in the apartment. Then, she controls it. crosses to the cot, sits on the edge of it. She doesn't take his hand, she has stopped reaching first. He did that. He looks at her, and then at Obi-Wan, and then at the door, where Ahsoka stands in the frame. She was in the medbay's outer room. Recovering from a cut along her arm she sustained covering the relay's secondary entrance. She is bandaged and slightly gray around the edges, and looking at him with an expression that is past the point of performing composure. He did this to all three of them. He has been doing it since Mortis, in the name of protecting them, and the only honest account of what that protection has cost is present in this room right now, written on three faces he knows better than his own. "Close the door," he says. Ahsoka closes it. He starts with Palpatine because it is the hardest and the most necessary, and because if he starts anywhere else he will find reasons to stop before he reaches it. The Chancellor is a Sith Lord, he says. His name, his real name, is Darth Sidious. He has been operating from inside the Republic for at least 3 decades. He engineered the war. Both sides of it, the Separatists answer to his apprentice, Count Dooku, who answers to him. The clone army was commissioned on his orders, through a trail he made sure leads to a dead Jedi. The chips in the clones, the ones I found on Kamino, activate on his command. All of them. Simultaneously, they are designed to make the clones kill every Jedi in the field. The room is very quiet. Obi-Wan's face does not change expression in the way of a man suppressing a large reaction through a large effort. Padmé's hands are still in her lap. Her eyes move to Obi-Wan, and then back. Ahsoka has gone absolutely motionless in the way of someone who has just had a number of things rearrange themselves into a shape that was there all along. He keeps going. Because stopping now would be worse than starting. "I know all of this because of Mortis," he says. "The Father didn't just test me. He showed me everything, my future, what I become if nothing changes." He describes the vision, all 5 beats, the way they arrived, the way they have been arriving every day since, not as nightmare but as intrusion, a single frame at a time, inserted between one breath and the next. The younglings first. He doesn't look at any of them while he describes it. He looks at his hands, both of them, the flesh and the metal, resting on the medbay blanket. Then, Ahsoka's corridor. He makes himself look at her when he describes this one. Her face does something complicated and quiet, and she doesn't look away from him. Then Padmé. He describes the volcanic rock and the black figure and the way her hand reached and didn't reach him. He watches Padmé while he says it. Her expression is the one she wears when she is in Senate debate, and the vote is going the wrong way, and she is recalculating in real time, but her eyes, underneath the recalculation, are doing something else. The older thing. The thing she has been holding since the first night. The mask. He describes the chamber and the table and the face that was his, and wasn't. He describes the sound of the first mechanical breath. Then, the world. He describes the silence where billions of voices were. The room is quiet for a long time after he finishes. Obi-Wan speaks first. His voice is steady in the manner of a man who has made it steady through deliberate effort and does not care if that effort is visible. "The Father wiped your memory," he says. "And it didn't hold. No, because you're the chosen one. That's my working theory." Obi-Wan absorbs this. Something moves across his face. Not fear of Anakin. He registers that immediately, and with a relief so profound it manifests as a physical loosening in his chest, but awe and grief. And something that is recognizably pride in the specific form it takes when the thing you're proud of costs someone enormously. Padmé's hand finds his, not the mechanical one, the real one. She doesn't say anything. She turns his hand over in both of hers and holds it, and that is all, and it is more than enough. Every cold moment, she says quietly, not as an accusation, but as a realization arriving in real time. Since Mortis. All of it, he says. She presses her lips together, closes her eyes briefly, opens them. "You absolute," she says, very quietly, stubborn, impossible. "I know," he says. From the door, Ahsoka makes a sound that is not quite a laugh and not quite a sob and is entirely her. She crosses the room and sits on the other side of the cot and says nothing, and her presence on his right is as deliberate as Padmé's on his left, and something that Anakin has been holding alone since Mortis. Something that was never meant to be held alone, that has been costing him in ways he won't fully account for until much later, shifts its weight and is shared. The wall is coming down. Not because it failed, not because the vision forced his hand or Palpatine broke through, or the war finally extracted what it was always trying to extract from him. Because it did its job, and it cost too much to hold alone, and the people in this room are strong enough now. He made sure of it. He breathes. For the first time since Mortis, he breathes without counting. Morning comes through the medbay window like an apology. Not the burnt orange of Coruscant's perpetual light pollution haze. Actual dawn. The specific pale gold that exists for 40 minutes each morning, before the city's own luminescence overwhelms it, arriving through the east, facing window and laying itself across the floor in long, quiet rectangles. Anakin watches it move. He has been awake since before it arrived, lying still in the way of a man whose body requires rest, and whose mind has decided not to participate. Obi-Wan slept in the chair. He is still there, arms folded, head slightly forward, breathing in the even rhythm of a Jedi who has learned to take sleep where it appears rather than waiting for the appropriate conditions. Padmé's on the small couch against the wall, a hospital blanket over her legs, her datapad dark on the cushion beside her. She had been reading. Or performing reading. Until sometime in the early hours when exhaustion overruled intention. Ahsoka is cross-legged on the floor between them both, back against the wall, asleep sitting upright in the way she sometimes does after heavy operations, her lekku draped forward over her shoulders. He looks at all three of them in the morning light and holds the image deliberately. The way you hold a thing you know you will need to return to. Obi-Wan wakes first, as he always does, a Jedi reflex, the body's internal clock calibrated by 20 years of pre-dawn meditation. He straightens in the chair, blinks once, and looks immediately at Anakin. Not around the room, not at the window. At Anakin. As if even in sleep some part of him has been keeping watch. You didn't rest, Obi-Wan says. I rested some. You rested none. He stands, rolls his shoulders and moves to the window. He looks out at the city for a moment with his hands behind his back. How do you feel? Like I fought Grievous. You did fight Grievous. Then accurately. Obi-Wan turns from the window and looks at him with the expression he reserves for moments when he wants to say something and is choosing the right instrument for it. Not the quick version, not the deflective wit that he uses for lighter cargo, but the considered one. He has a range of expressions for this, all of them reading as variations on I am taking this seriously, and I need you to know it. I owe you an apology, Obi-Wan says. Anakin blinks. For what? For every time. In the last several months that I noticed something was wrong and chose to respect your silence rather than push through it. He pauses. I told myself it was consideration. It was partly cowardice. I didn't want to hear something I wasn't prepared to carry. He meets Anakin's eyes. I should have pushed. If you'd pushed I would have deflected, Anakin says. I was very good at it. You were terrible at it, Obi-Wan says. I was very good at accepting it. Padmé wakes to find them talking, and lies still for a moment listening, the way she does when she wants to understand the room before she enters it. Then she sits up and folds the blanket with the automatic precision of a woman who was raised to leave things orderly, and looks at them both. Is there calf? She asks. There is not. Obi-Wan goes to find some, and the act of it, the small domestic errand, the most senior Jedi on Coruscant hunting for a beverage dispenser in a Republic medbay corridor, releases something in Anakin's chest that he hadn't identified as tension until it isn't there anymore. Ahsoka wakes when Obi-Wan returns with 4 cups, opens her eyes without preamble, accepts the calf, and says, "What did I miss?" "Nothing yet," Padmé says. "We were waiting for you." Ahsoka looks at Anakin. He nods. She wraps both hands around the cup. Then let's start. Obi-Wan speaks for 11 minutes without interruption, and what he does in those 11 minutes is the thing Anakin has needed someone to do since Mortis and could not ask for, because asking would have required explaining, and explaining would have required trusting, and he had decided he could not afford trust. He reframes the entire architecture of the last several months, not correcting it. Not dismissing the cost, but rebuilding the context around it so that its shape changes. You saw the worst version of yourself, Obi-Wan says, in complete detail. And you chose, alone, with no support, no confirmation that the choice was even working, under active manipulation by the most dangerous being in the Republic, to suffer rather than let that version exist. He sets his calf down. The Jedi speak of facing the dark side as a test. What you did is not what the texts describe. It is harder than what the texts describe. Because the texts assume the Jedi has the Order behind him. He pauses. You had nothing behind you. And you held. The room is quiet. Anakin looks at his hands. The morning light has moved off the floor and up the wall. I made mistakes in it, he says. With all of you. The way I trained Ahsoka. The way I was with Padmé. The things I couldn't tell you. Yes, Obi-Wan says. You did. And those cost real things, and we are not pretending otherwise. He glances at Ahsoka, then at Padmé, a brief acknowledgement that this accounting is theirs to give, not his to dismiss. But the man who makes mistakes trying to prevent a galaxy-wide atrocity. Alone. For months, without breaking, that man has already proven the vision wrong. You are not him, Anakin. Whatever darkness the Father showed you. You are the evidence against it. Ahsoka is looking at the floor. Her jaw works once. The training, she says, quietly. The drills. Pushing me past the point I thought I had. She looks up. You were trying to make sure I survived what was coming. Yes, even knowing you might not be there to help me through it. He doesn't answer immediately. The answer is yes. And they both know it. And the knowing sits between them without needing the word. I'm angry, she says. I need you to know. I'm angry. Not at what you were trying to do. At the situation. At the fact that you carried that alone. Her voice stays even. The anger underneath it is real and controlled and entirely Ahsoka. I'm also not transferring. That's settled. I just need you to know both things simultaneously. I know both things, he says. She nods once. Sharp, good, Padmé sets her calf down and straightens, the movement that means she has finished processing and is shifting to action. The senator replacing the wife, not because the wife has left, but because the senator is also the wife, has always been both at once, and right now the situation requires the version with the strategy. Palpatine cannot be arrested through Jedi action alone, she says. An order deploying against the Chancellor, even with evidence, will be framed as a coup. He has spent 30 years ensuring that framing would land. She looks at Obi-Wan. You know this. I know it, he agrees. Which means this moves through the Senate first. Not the full Senate, he owns too much of it. But a closed emergency session of the Security Committee, with the right members present, with the Camino chip data as primary evidence. She pauses. I can call that session. I have 2 allies on the committee who don't owe Palpatine anything, and 3 more who will follow evidence over loyalty if the evidence is structured correctly. The chip data alone may not be sufficient, Obi-Wan says. It proves a conspiracy against the clones. It doesn't prove his Sith identity directly. No, Padmé agrees. But it creates a legitimate legal framework for investigation, which creates legitimate grounds for restricting his emergency powers, which closes the primary mechanism he'd use to accelerate everything if he suspects we're moving. Anakin watches her work and feels the specific quality of relief that comes from no longer being the only person in a room who understands what they're facing. There's a communications infrastructure he uses, Anakin says. A private command relay, separate from the standard guard channels. It's how he would transmit Order 66 across the galaxy simultaneously. If that relay goes dark before we move against him directly, he loses his reach. Obi-Wan finishes. He loses his reach. Anakin confirms. Whatever he controls in the field, whoever he has in the security forces, none of it coordinates without that relay. Padmé's already reaching for her datapad. I know someone who can slice it. Someone who is not officially affiliated with anyone in this room. You've been building toward this, Anakin says, not an accusation. Recognition, she looks at him steadily. I've been building toward something since the third week after Mortis. I didn't know the full shape yet. Now I do. They stay in the medbay room until mid-morning. The plan takes shape in pieces, not a clean final thing but a living structure. Each component dependent on the others. Each person's contribution distinct and necessary. Obi-Wan will brief the council. Not the full vision, the evidence, the chip data, the Kamino access logs Anakin copied. The pattern of the ambushes mapped against classified file access. Enough for Masters Yoda and Windu to move without the council fracturing into debate. Ahsoka will stay close to Anakin in the field, not as a Padawan running behind a master, as a partner covering a flank. The distinction matters, and she receives it as such, her posture shifting in a way that is almost imperceptible. The change of someone who has been given a weight they actually want to carry. When Obi-Wan finally stands to leave, he stops at the door and looks back at Anakin with the expression that is not quite sentiment, because Obi-Wan has too much control for unguarded sentiment but is adjacent to it. Close enough that the gap is only technical. For what it's worth, he says, I am extraordinarily proud of you. Anakin doesn't answer immediately. The mechanical hand rests open on the blanket. It's worth a great deal, he says finally. Obi-Wan nods once, goes. The morning light has reached the far wall now, pale gold going warm, Coruscant's own luminescence beginning to compete with it, and slowly winning. Padmé's hand is still in his. She hasn't let go since last night. He doesn't ask her to. The Senate Security Committee meets in a room that has no windows. This is deliberate. The chamber was designed in the early Republic for exactly the kind of session it is hosting now, when the business conducted inside it cannot afford the vulnerability of being observed from adjacent towers or compromised by directional audio equipment positioned in the middle distance. The walls are lined with signal-dampening material that hasn't been updated since the Ruzan Reformation and doesn't need to be. Because the principle hasn't changed, what happens in this room stays in this room until the people inside it decide otherwise. Padmé requested the session 48 hours ago through a provision so obscure it requires 3 cross-references to locate in the Senate Charter, an emergency convening mechanism available only to full senators with security clearance Delta 7 or above, triggerable without the Chancellor's countersignature in cases of suspected executive compromise. Palpatine's office flagged the provision request within 6 minutes. She was counting on that. There are 11 senators in the room when she begins. 7 she invited. 4 who invited themselves, which tells her exactly what she needs to know about where their loyalties are positioned. They came to watch, which means they came to report. Which means the 6 minutes between her request and Palpatine's flag is now a resource she can use. She lets the 4 watchers sit. She lets them open their data pads and prepare their observations. Then she presents the Kamino data. Not all of it. Not the surgical removal protocols, or the activation architecture, which are operational intelligence and will move through separate channels. What she presents is the structure, the inhibitor chip program, the authorization chain, the production records cross-referenced against the official GAR medical registry, which contains no record of the chips, because the chips were never submitted for registry. A conspiracy of omission running from Kamino's Sub-Level 9 to the highest tier of Republic military procurement, documented in the Kaminoan's own technical files. She presents it the way she presents every argument that matters, not as an accusation but as a question. This data exists. This data is verified. This data describes a program operating within the Republic's military infrastructure that no authorized body commissioned, approved, or was informed of. She looks around the table. The committee's first obligation is to determine the source and scope of that program. The 4 watchers are very still. Senator Organa speaks first. Bail, who she briefed privately 2 days ago over an encrypted channel, whose reaction to the chip data had been the specific controlled fury of a man who has been suspicious of Palpatine for years and has just been handed the first piece of evidence he can actually use. Senator Amidala, Bail says, I move that this committee authorize an immediate independent audit of all GAR medical records against the Kamino production data, and that all findings be sealed from executive review pending the audit's completion. 2 of her allies second it before the watchers can formulate an objection. The motion passes 6-4. And the 4 Watchers' datapads are now sealed by the room's signal dampeners, and nothing they've recorded is leaving this chamber until she says so. Across the city, in the Senate building's communications infrastructure, a woman named Dara, who does not officially exist and is not officially affiliated with Senator Amidala's office, sits in front of a terminal that she accessed through a maintenance panel on sublevel 3 and has been working for 4 hours. Palpatine's private command relay is elegant. Anakin had described it accurately. A network running parallel to the standard GAR channels through a series of repeater nodes distributed across Coruscant and 12-core world installations, maintained under a procurement identity that traces to a shell contracting firm, that traces to another shell contracting firm, that stops tracing after the 4th iteration. Someone spent a long time building it to be unfollowable. Dara has been following it for 4 hours and has found the primary transmission node. She plants 2 things. The first is a monitoring package that will record all traffic through the relay for the next 72 hours. Forensic evidence, the kind that will survive a legal challenge if this ends in a tribunal rather than a duel. The second is a signal interrupt, precisely targeted at the relay's specific frequency band, which will activate on a timer she sets for 6 hours from now. At that point, Palpatine's private reach across the galaxy will narrow to whatever is physically within his line of sight. The standard GAR command channels will remain intact. She is a precise woman, and this is a precise operation. But the shadow infrastructure he has spent years constructing, the one that answers only to him, will go dark. She closes the terminal, replaces the maintenance panel, walks out through the same entrance she used to arrive, which is a service corridor that feeds into a public thoroughfare 4 levels below the Senate building's lobby. Anakin receives her confirmation on a channel that doesn't exist either. The council session is shorter than Obi-Wan expected. He had prepared for resistance. The specific institutional resistance of masters, who have spent decades constructing careful diplomatic protocols precisely to avoid the kind of catastrophic, unverifiable accusation he is presenting. He had prepared counter-arguments for Windu's skepticism and talking points for the members most likely to demand external verification before accepting intelligence sourced from a Padawan's force vision. He needs almost none of it. Yoda listens to the chip data first, the Camino records, the authorization chain, the activation architecture. His eyes close briefly at the description of what the chips are designed to do. When they open, something in them is very old and very tired in a way that suggests this is not entirely a surprise, not the specifics, but the shape of it. The shadow Yoda has been sensing in the Force for years, given a name and a mechanism. Known for some time I have, Yoda says, that the darkness in the Senate runs deeper than any one vote or faction. He pauses. Evidence of this nature, verifiable, specific, changes what the Order can do. He looks at Windu. Windu's expression is the expression of a man who has been carrying a heavy suspicion for a long time and has just been told the weight was accurate. We move carefully, Windu says. We do not move publicly. Not yet. The moment Palpatine knows the Council is mobilizing against him, he accelerates, Obi-Wan says. I know, which is why the Senate moves first. Windu looks at him for a long moment. Whose plan is this? It belongs to all 4 of us, Obi-Wan says. But the architecture is primarily Anakin's and Senator Amidala's. Something shifts in Windu's face. Not softness. Windu doesn't do softness, but the specific recalibration of a man updating a long-held assessment. Brief Masters Plo and Ayla, he says finally. No one else until we're ready to move. If this leaks before the Senate session completes, it won't, Obi-Wan says. Palpatine learns about the Security Committee session at the same time the motion passes. He is in his office. He receives the notification on his private terminal, a flag from one of the 4 senators he positioned in that room specifically to watch for exactly this kind of procedural maneuver, and he reads it twice, and then he sets the datapad down on his desk with the measured precision of a man managing a significant internal reaction through a sophisticated external apparatus. His aide is in the room. The aide sees nothing alarming. The Chancellor reads a notification, sets it down and folds his hands on the desk, and the aide sees the expression he always sees, patient, considered, entirely in control. The aide is dismissed with a small errand. The door closes. Sidious sits in his office alone and allows himself, for approximately 30 seconds, to feel the shape of what is happening. The committee session is a legal instrument. It doesn't touch him directly. Its findings don't implicate him yet. But the chip data means someone accessed Kamino's sub-level records, which means someone knew those records existed, which means Anakin, because there is no other vector through which that specific intelligence could have reached Senator Amidala's desk. Anakin, who has been wrong since Mortis. Flat and gray and unreachable, running a stillness that Sidious has been probing for months without finding the bottom of. Who survived 2 engineered ambushes without breaking. Who has been, in retrospect, doing something deliberate and patient and structured, rather than simply recovering from whatever Mortis did to him. He reaches for his private comm. The relay, his contingency, his private reach across the galaxy, is the next thing he secures. He sends the activation command. Nothing. He sends it again. The relay returns a carrier signal, and no confirmation. Somewhere in the system's infrastructure, something is not working. He stares at the terminal. 30 seconds later he stands. And his face does something it has not done in a public context in 30 years. It loses the performance entirely. Just for a moment, the mask of Palpatine slipping to reveal the thing underneath. Cold and very old, and for the first time in this story, genuinely uncertain. Then it returns. Control reasserting itself over the uncertainty, the way it always does. Because Sidious has survived the Jedi Order and the Republic and 2 decades of the longest con in galactic history, and he is not finished. He moves to the door. He will go to ground. Regroup. There are contingencies for contingencies, and he has always been 4 steps ahead, and if the relay is compromised, then he works with what is not compromised. And if the Senate is moving, then he moves faster. And if Anakin Skywalker has somehow become the architect of this instead of its unwitting instrument, then he will learn how and correct for it. Because a Sith Lord does not lose to his own apprentice in waiting. He opens the office door. Anakin is standing in the corridor. Obi-Wan is beside him. The office door seals behind Palpatine with a soft pneumatic sound, entirely ordinary. It sounds, in this moment, like finality. Palpatine looks at Anakin. His eyes move across the younger man's face with the sonar quality that has defined every interaction between them since Mortis, sending something out, measuring what returns. What returns is clear, certain, without anger. The mask of the Chancellor falls away completely. What replaces it is Sidious, not in robes, not performing, just present, the creature underneath the costume, older than Palpatine by decades, and far more dangerous. Well, Sidious says. His voice has dropped to the register that exists below his public voice, the gravelly ancient thing that the Senate has never heard. Here we are. The corridor is empty. The doors are sealed. The 3 of them, alone. Sidious moves first. He always moves first. It is the oldest principle of Sith combat doctrine, initiative as dominance, the first action as a statement of control before the exchange has properly begun. Lightning erupts from both hands simultaneously, splitting toward Anakin and Obi-Wan in 2 separate arcs. Fast and blue-white and enormous, the kind of power that ends conversations before they start. Anakin catches his arc on his blade. The Force pushes the discharge up and wide, scorching the ceiling. Obi-Wan rolls left and comes up inside the spread of the second arc, and his lightsaber is lit and moving before he straightens. The corridor fills with the sound of it, the crackling discharge, the hum of 2 blades, the specific silence underneath all of it that exists when every person present understands that what is happening now is not a negotiation. Sidious fights the way a storm fights, not with style or discipline or the considered geometry of a Jedi duel, with total, committed force. The dark side moving through him as raw weather, enormous and contemptuous of the individual. He produces a 3rd burst of lightning with his left hand while engaging Obi-Wan's blade with his right, and Anakin deflects it back into the wall, and the wall blackens and buckles, and none of them stop moving. Anakin fights from stillness. Even now, even here, even against the man who built the mask and the chamber and the 23 years of dark inside it, the stillness holds. He is aware of it as a choice being continuously remade, not a state that exists automatically. Every time Sidious presses him back, every time the lightning comes and the instinct to answer with rage rises in his chest like a tide, he chooses again. Not calm as absence, calm as architecture. The deliberate structure he has been building since Mortis, load-bearing, tested, real. He presses forward into a sequence Obi-Wan taught him when he was 17 years old, a master-apprentice form designed for exactly this configuration. 2 blades coordinating against one, the geometry requiring both fighters to read each other without communication. He has not run this form with Obi-Wan in years. His muscle memory has it perfectly. So does Obi-Wan's. They don't speak. They don't need to. Obi-Wan takes the outside angle and Anakin drives the center, and Sidious, for the first time in the engagement, has to give ground. "You think this is discipline," Sidious says. He is still moving, still fighting. The words arriving between exchanges with the precision of a man who has been talking people into surrender for 60 years. "This stillness you've built. You think it makes you stronger." Anakin doesn't answer. Answers cost attention and he needs all of his. "It makes you smaller," Sidious continues. He drives a vicious overhead cut at Obi-Wan and redirects it into a backhand sweep at Anakin's ribs. The cracked ones, because of course he knows, because he engineered the engagement that produced them. The dark side is not a temptation, boy. It is gravity. You cannot discipline your way out of gravity. Anakin blocks the sweep. Steps inside. Forces Sidious to disengage or take a pommel strike to the sternum. Sidious disengages. "I know my destiny, Sidious," Anakin says. Quiet, certain, not a shout, not defiance. The register of a man stating a fact about the physical world. It is not at your side. Something moves in the old man's eyes. Not fear. Sidious does not fear in the way ordinary people fear. But recognition. Perhaps the recognition of a strategist encountering a variable that his models did not account for and cannot, in real time, correct for. "No," Sidious says. "I see that now." He shifts. The strategy changes in the space between one breath and the next, abandoning seduction, abandoning the psychological approach, abandoning 30 years of patient cultivation as simply and completely as discarding a broken tool. What replaces it is pure intention to destroy. He is faster now. Colder, the lightning comes in sustained bursts rather than targeted strikes, and the blade work accelerates past the point where individual techniques are distinguishable and becomes simply force applied at speed, and Anakin pushes to his actual ceiling to stay ahead of it. And the ceiling is very high, but so is Sidious, and this is, in the most honest accounting, the hardest he has ever fought. Obi-Wan takes a glancing strike to his left shoulder, not the blade, the force push that accompanies it, throwing him into the wall. He hits hard and comes off it immediately, but the gap in coverage exists for 2 seconds, and Sidious drives through it toward Anakin, full extension, committing completely. Anakin catches the blade on a crossguard parry that costs him his footing. He goes to one knee. Sidious stands over him with a lightsaber and 30 years of careful, patient, catastrophic rage, and for exactly half a second the advantage is complete. Anakin feels it, the moment, its weight and its specificity. He feels also the old pull, not toward the dark side, not toward rage, toward the simpler thing underneath the rage, fear. The fear that it isn't enough, that the stillness breaks here, that the vision was always going to be right, that he is kneeling in a corridor in the Senate building and nothing he has done since Mortis has changed the fundamental equation. He chooses again. He drops his blade hand, a half movement that reads as surrender, and when Sidious's eyes track to the lowering weapon, Anakin brings his left hand up and pushes with the force. Not a combat push. The biggest push he has. The chosen one push. The thing he used on Mortis that bent the rules of what the living world is allowed to do. The power that does not belong to Anakin Skywalker, the Jedi Knight, but to something older and larger that runs through him like a current runs through wire. Sidious leaves the ground. He travels the length of the corridor in a single arc, and meets the far wall with a sound that is not dramatic. It is simply final. His lightsaber spins away across the floor. His lightning goes with it. He lands. He does not get up quickly. When he does begin to rise, Obi-Wan is there, blade at his throat, and the mathematical problem of the moment resolves itself with absolute clarity. Sidious goes still. Anakin stands. His ribs register every movement with specific, itemized objection. He crosses the corridor and looks at the man on the floor, not Palpatine, not the kindly Chancellor with the wooden office and the careful smile. Sidious, undisguised, old and cold and reduced, for the first time in this story, to the accurate dimensions of what he actually is. A person who chose a long time ago to make power the only thing that mattered, and built 60 years of architecture on top of that choice, and is now sitting on a corridor floor because a man who refused to become what this man designed him to become, pushed back. Anakin looks at him for a moment. The temptation exists. He is honest about that. It exists, and it has weight, and it is not nothing to decline it. The lightsaber is in his hand, and the man who built the mask and burned his face, and murdered his mother's last years, and killed billions on a green-blue world whose name he still doesn't know, is 2 meters away, and the corridor is empty. He clips his lightsaber back to his belt. "Obi-Wan," he says, "restrain him." Obi-Wan produces force binders from his belt. He came prepared, which means he trusted the plan enough to bring the conclusion of it rather than the contingency, and secures Sidious's wrists with the efficiency of a man who has made arrests before, and finds the procedure preferable to the alternative. Through the sealed door at the corridor's end, Republic security forces arrive. Padmé's people, briefed, authorized, the legal framework already constructed, and waiting for this moment to inhabit it. They take Sidious into custody with the specific procedural formality of a government that is, against considerable odds, still functioning. The aftermath arrives quietly, the way all real endings do. The Security Committee's findings unseal that afternoon. The inhibitor chip data enters the public record simultaneously through 3 separate Senate offices, Padmé's architecture, built so that no single point of suppression can stop the release. By evening, the HoloNet carries the story in pieces that are individually confusing and collectively undeniable, and the pieces keep arriving until the shape is clear. Kix begins the surgical removal program 4 days later, working with 2 other clone medics Anakin identified through the months of watching Rex's unit. The procedure is delicate and slow and will take a long time. It begins. Dooku, informed of Sidious's arrest through a chain of intelligence that moves faster than his ability to counter it, withdraws the Separatist fleet from 3 contested systems before the end of the week. The war does not end that day. But it changes shape, the invisible hand that has been holding both sides against each other losing its grip, the machine running on momentum rather than intention, and momentum runs out. Ahsoka requests no transfers. 3 weeks later, Anakin stands on the veranda of Padmé's apartment in the morning, not the controlled dark of their usual visits. Actual morning, the pale gold of it. The 40 minutes before Coruscant's own light overwhelms the suns, the city spread below them in all its impossible permanent hum. Padmé stands beside him. Their shoulders are touching. Her hand is in his. Not the mechanical one. The real one. The one that is warm and has a pulse, and can feel the specific weight of what she is choosing when she holds it. They are standing in daylight. He looks at the city. All of it. The 10 trillion lives burning bright in the morning. Not unknowing anymore. Or not entirely. The public record changing something fundamental about what they know, even if they don't have all of it yet. He looks at it and lets himself feel it. The full weight of it. Without the counting. Without the discipline. Just the feeling itself landing where feelings are supposed to land. His mechanical hand rests at his side. Open. Flat. He is not Darth Vader. He did not become him. Not because the vision lied. Not because the Force relented. Not because someone intervened at the final moment and pulled him back from the edge. Because he chose, alone and daily, and at considerable cost, to be something the vision didn't show, something the Father didn't model, something Sidious never had a playbook for. He is Anakin Skywalker. The morning light moves across the city below and he watches it go, and breathes, and holds his wife's hand in the daylight where anyone could see. It is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.